Gotta stay hydrated. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather, and as always, I'm reading with a vengeance, and I hope you are too. Today, I'm here to talk to you about my 5 favorite books of the second quarter of the year. I did these videos last year. I did a video telling you my 5 favorite books from the first quarter of the year. I will link that down below. So I've read 37 books in the second quarter of this year. So that's April, May, and June, and not for nothing, but I'm recording this on June 29th, and I don't think the books that I will have finished by tomorrow, the 30th, last day of the quarter, are gonna make this list. So anyways, 37 books that I've completed this quarter, 2 DNFs. Funnily enough, they were from the long list from the Women's Prize for Fiction. I believe it was Glory by No Violet Bulawayo and Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. So not bad, 2 DNFs out of 37 books. There have been 6 5-star books in this particular quarter. Now, I will say that the 5 books on this list as my favorites of the quarter aren't necessarily all 5 stars. They're definitely 4 stars. I have a mixture of 4 stars and 5 stars, but I'm not going to get too deep into that. So this isn't about star ratings, and I won't go too deeply into how I rate my books. Honestly, when I say star ratings, it's just what I gave them on Goodreads. It's really kind of hard to quantify what makes a favorite book, what makes a book you absolutely love. For example, Demon Copperhead, which I believe was one of my favorites in the first quarter of the year, was a 4.5-star book for me. Even though in my heart, it's all the stars. I absolutely love that story, but it was deducted a 0.5 star because of its length. And that's just kind of how I rate books. Absolutely loved that book. One of my favorites of all time, definitely one of my favorites of the year. But it wasn't a 5-star book. So just a little clarification there. But with no more further blather, let's get started in talking about what 5 books were my favorites for the last 3 months. In no particular order, only the order in which I read them. First on this list is Wandering Souls by Cecile Penn. This was on the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and this is the one I was absolutely gutted about not making the short list. This one absolutely deserved to make the short list, but that's kind of hard to say because I believe that every book on the short list deserved to be there. So what are you going to do? Somebody's got to miss the cut. And unfortunately, it was Wandering Souls. Absolutely love the story so much. It was one of those ones that took me by surprise. I knew I was going to like it, but it really took me by surprise by how much I absolutely loved this book. And it was a relatively short one. It was only like 240 pages, but it packed a punch. This one follows a trio of siblings, Vietnamese siblings, An, Minh, and Tran, I believe. They're young. It's just at the end of the Vietnamese War, and they are escaping Vietnam in hopes of getting to America to start a new life. They go in 2 boats. It's a pretty big family. I believe there's 7 children total, plus the parents, but only one of the boats makes it. And so An, who is the oldest sister, is left to take care of her younger brothers, Minh and Tran. It tells their story of how they were kind of quarantined in Hong Kong first, and then they end up going to the UK instead of America to live with their uncle. So they're all by themselves in the UK. An is growing up herself, but she's also taking care of her little brothers. She is dealing with the struggles of being an Asian American during that time after the Vietnamese-American conflict. It just is beautiful, beautiful story. There's also kind of a little side story of one of the younger siblings who does not make it, who was in the other boat, and we get his perspective from above, kind of watching over his siblings. It's kind of touching. It's beautiful, spectacularly written. Can't recommend this book enough. Absolutely one of my favorites of the year. So I couldn't not put it on this list of one of my top 5 for the second quarter. Next on this list is Ozark Dogs by Eli Craner. This one took me by surprise too. I absolutely loved this story. I listened to it and it was phenomenally narrated. This is a Southern thriller that follows 2 feuding families in a small Arkansas town. You are following mostly Jeremiah, who is a Vietnam War veteran who is taking care of his granddaughter because his son, who is his granddaughter Joanna's dad, is in prison. So Jeremiah is doing his best to raise Joanna. Joanna is a junior or senior in high school. She's smart. Jeremiah has kind of taught her street smarts, taught her how to fight, taught her how to shoot. She's very, very capable. But the other family who hates Jeremiah's family are a group of pretty much meth running criminals. They have a score to settle with Jeremiah's family, and so they go after Joanna. And Jeremiah, not trusting the law enforcement in his town, takes matters into his own hands. And the story goes from there, and it is a page turner. I physically gasped in more than one occasion. I thought it was going to go in one direction. I thought I was going to just hate the book, but it didn't go in that direction, thankfully. I'm not going to give any spoilers away here, but it really kept me on my toes. I absolutely love the story and the character development as far as Jeremiah and Joanna, and even the villains from the meth family, Bun and Evale. They were just thrilling to follow. Absolutely love this story. Can't wait to read more from this author because this is the only one I've read from him. Super thrilled to have found him. Absolutely love this book. Quite possibly a favorite of the year. Next one on this list, I'm super happy to have on this list because this is one of those books where it was super, super hyped, but for really, really good reason. The hype was real on this one and well-deserved, and that is, of course, How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. If this is one that you've been hesitating to get into because it's overhyped, I'm here to tell you, you won't be disappointed in this one. How to Sell a Haunted House follows through with Hendrix's writing style, his readability, his humor, his darkness, his just absolutely thorough, spot-on ability to creep you the F out. The things that he uses to creep you out in this story, I didn't think I was afraid of those particular things. Again, no spoilers. Come to find out, I am afraid of those things. But this isn't just another scary story. Yes, it is sufficiently scary, but it also has to deal with the relationship between a brother and sister. They've been estranged for many years, and basically that's the gist of this story if I haven't talked to you about it already, and if you don't already know, because who hasn't talked about this book this year? But this follows Louise and her brother Mark. Their parents were killed in a car accident, and so Louise has to come back to her town after many, many years to help settle their affairs. And she has to do it with her brother Mark, who she hasn't gotten along with since their childhood, because some dark shit happened in their childhood, which you get into in this book. So anyways, you're dealing with family secrets, family history, siblings who have been estranged and are trying to find their way back to each other because they're the only family that they have now. And they're trying to do all of this while trying to sell a haunted house. It's just delicious. I mean, need I say more? I think I've pretty much ticked all the boxes of what makes a really, really great book. Hype is real, folks. The hype is real. Next on this list is another book that I think has gotten a lot of talk on the socials. I don't think it's been overhyped. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of those books that is, I think, considered a Marmite book, a love it or you hate it book, or whatever, but I'm here to tell you I love this book, and that is Shelby Van Pelt's Remarkably Bright Creatures. I love this book so much, you guys. If you get a chance to read this book, if you haven't yet, and you like audiobooks, please, please, please listen to it, because the voice and inflection that the actor who voices the octopus in this story is just everything. The octopus in this story is Marcellus. And Marcellus couldn't be a more perfect name for this octopus. And the way he is voiced on the audiobook is just, it's everything. It makes listening to this beautiful story even more worth it. Let me tell you about the story. So basically this follows Tova, who she is an elderly widow. She lives on her own. She's very independent, but she's still reeling from the death of her husband, who died, I think, a year ago. And she never really got over the disappearance of her 18-year-old son some 30 years ago. She has her group of friends that she spends time with, but she mostly likes spending time by herself. Totally relatable. She works part-time as a cleaner at a local aquarium, and that's where she befriends a giant Pacific octopus named Marcellus. You're also following Cameron, who is kind of a ne'er-do-well. He's a 30-year-old guy who doesn't really know what to do with his life. He's broken up with his girlfriend because she has pretty much had it with his irresponsibility, lack of ambition, lack of ability to hold down a job. Cameron is dealing with his issues, trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life, dealing with the fact that his drug-addicted mother disappeared years ago. He never really knew his father, but then one day he finds something in his mother's belongings that give a tip on who his dad is. And so he decides to hunt down his dad because this man that he finds that he thinks is his dad is wealthy. So Cam goes on the road to try to get back 30 years of child support that he's owed. And it turns out that this man lives in the same town as Toba. So he gets to town looking for his dad, and their worlds kind of collide. And the story goes from there, and it's delightful. There's humor, there's heartwarming family stuff, and there's Marcellus, okay? Marcellus is worth the read, okay? I can't talk about this octopus enough. He's just fantastic. Read it, all right? Just read it. And finally on this list is a book that really kind of took me by surprise for different reasons than the other books took me by surprise. The book I'm talking about is Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. Now, it took me by surprise because it's a YA novel. However, it's now, I believe, considered a modern classic. It's been around for 20 plus years, and this book talks about things that we are just now in recent history talking about kind of on a public forum. And she did it years and years ago in a way that we are more collectively doing it now. This book is brilliantly written. This book I wish I had in my hands when I was a teenager. This book is the "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret" kind of vibe to it, but darker, much, much darker, but in a relatable way to teenagers, teenage girls specifically. This follows Melinda as she heads into her freshman year in high school. And this is after a summer party that she attends goes terribly, terribly wrong. Something terribly bad happens to her, and she has to deal with the fallout in the classic way that teenagers handle this type of issue, at least the way they used to. I listened to this one also, and it's masterfully narrated. The voice, the inflection, the vernacular of a teenage girl, the things that a teenage girl talks about, you know, the clothes that she wears, how she feels about her body, her relationship with her parents, starting high school, the terror of it all. Meanwhile, she's dealing with this assault that happened to her at this party by another high schooler who she has to face at school. Brilliantly told story. This is a story for everybody. If you have teenagers, if you have kids that are about to be teenagers, if you have kids who are about to have teenagers, if you're a teenager, please read this book. If you are not a teenager, but you once were a teenager, read this book. It might help you through some things. I cannot articulate enough how important this book is. Even if you're none of those things that I just mentioned, please read this book. It's short, it's barely over 200 pages. Never thought I'd say it, but this is a stunning YA modern classic. And I'm just so glad I read it. So that is it. Those are the 5 books that are my favorites of the second quarter of this year. Have you read any of these books? And if not, what are you waiting for? What are you doing with your life? Absolutely love these books. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really love sharing my favorites with you. Really, this is the core of why I started YouTube, is to talk about books that I absolutely love. So this is one of my favorite videos to record. I hope you enjoyed it. Please tell me down in the doodly-doo what have been your favorites so far this year. I would love to hear about them, or you could just say hello. If you're still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop, and a subscribe would be wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.